There's a particular kind of anger that doesn't feel hot. It feels cold, like metal left outside overnight. You wake up and the world is already guilty. The job is rigged, people are stupid. Nobody gets it. Your chest tightens with a familiar righteousness that almost passes for strength. And yet, beneath it, something quieter keeps knocking. Not a moral lesson, not a motivational speech, a small, wordless dread, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing the cliff is inside you. Because if you stop blaming the world, you may have to face what you've been running from. The possibility that your life is, in some painful way, yours. And that can feel like emotional death. We're taught to call this immaturity, as if you're simply stubborn, lazy, or entitled. But blame is rarely that simple. Blame is often an emergency exit installed in childhood when taking responsibility wasn't safe. When you were a boy, responsibility may have meant humiliation. It may have meant being punished for needs you didn't have words for. Maybe you were expected to man up before you were even fully a child. Maybe mistakes weren't met with guidance but with contempt. Maybe your home had the logic of a minefield, unpredictable, emotionally volatile, where the smallest misstep could detonate someone else's rage or withdrawal. So you learned a primitive equation. If it's my fault, I am in danger. Not just I did something wrong, but I am wrong. Shame doesn't correct you, it annihilates you. And in that landscape, blaming the world becomes a form of self-preservation. If the problem is always out there, then the vulnerable, unfinished places inside you don't have to be touched. You don't have to feel the old terror of being seen and found insufficient. Blame keeps you upright when your nervous system still associates accountability with exile. So no, this isn't just a character flaw. It's a strategy, a survival reflex, a way to avoid drowning in the original grief. In Jungian language, this pattern often belongs to the realm of the pure eternus, the eternal boy, not as an insult, but as an archetypal description, a psyche that stays ungrounded because grounding once felt like captivity. The pure survives by staying light, evasive, full of potential, full of explanations. He hovers above the soil where ordinary responsibility lives because the soil contains ghosts. Blame is one of his favorite spells. It keeps him innocent. It keeps him unburdened. It keeps the myth alive. If the world would just change, I would finally become myself. But underneath that myth is the shadow. The shadow isn't just bad behavior. It's everything you had to exile to be loved, tolerated, or left alone. Sometimes your shadow contains grief. Sometimes it contains tenderness. And sometimes, especially in men who were shamed for dependency, it contains a terrifying truth: need. So instead of feeling need, you feel accusation. Instead of admitting, I'm scared I won't measure up, you say, this is stupid. Instead of confessing, I don't know how, you declare, it's pointless. The psyche chooses blame because it's less vulnerable than longing. And then the persona, the mask, steps in. The persona might be the cynic, the intellectual, the I don't care man, the man who is always unimpressed, always above it. But the persona is just armor shaped like identity. Neuroscience echoes this. When early experiences pair mistakes with danger, the amygdala learns accountability equals threat. Your body doesn't interpret feedback as information, it interprets it as an oncoming udar. Cortisol rises. The nervous system prepares for fight, argument, domination, contempt, or for flight, avoidance, procrastination, disappearing. Sometimes you freeze, stuck in analysis, waiting for certainty. Sometimes you collapse into the dorsal vagal fog, where everything feels heavy and pointless. So, when someone says, take responsibility, your system doesn't hear growth, it hears execution. That's why the just own it advice fails. It's asking your body to walk back into a burning room and pretend it's only warm. But survival strategies have a price. Blame feels powerful for a moment, like a sword. Yet it slowly saws through your life. It keeps relationships shallow because intimacy requires confession. It keeps work stagnant because mastery requires being a beginner, being wrong in public, being corrected, being human. It keeps you lonely while insisting you're independent. And there is a quieter cost. You begin to distrust your own agency. If everything is always someone else's fault, then nothing is ever truly yours, not your failures, but also not your victories. Your life becomes a room you rent instead of a home you build. This is where the confrontation begins, not with punishment, but with grief. Because responsibility at depth isn't a spreadsheet of self-improvement. It is a funeral. It is the death of the fantasy that someone will arrive and finally make it easy, make it fair, make you safe enough to begin. It's the grief of realizing they may never apologize. The past may never be redeemed in the way you deserved. The boy in you may never get the childhood that would have made adulthood effortless. Truth often feels like grief because truth removes the old anesthesia. And yet it's also where your adulthood, your real masculinity begins, not as dominance, but as containment. The capacity to hold discomfort without outsourcing it onto the world. Integration is not becoming perfect, it's becoming real. It's learning to say with trembling honesty, I did that. And also, it makes sense that I did that. Not to excuse it, so you can finally change it without self-hatred. Here's a deep, non-performative practice for the next 7 days. Catch the blame at the doorway. Once per day, when you feel the surge of, it's their fault, pause and name the body state. Tight jaw, heat in chest, numbness, buzzing. This recruits consciousness before the old reflex drives the car. Ask the rehumanizing question. What would it mean about me if this were partially my responsibility? Don't argue with the answer. Write it down. You're looking for the hidden fear. I'll be rejected. I'll be trapped. I'll be humiliated. I'll discover I'm not enough. Offer the boy in you one sentence of truth. Responsibility is not punishment. It is me staying with you. If you can, take this to therapy or a men's group where accountability is practiced with compassion, not shame. And if all you can do today is notice the pattern without acting it out, that is not weakness. That is the beginning of consciousness, the first step out of the old spell and toward a life that is finally yours.